Hi readers, Lee here. Welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads. This is my second attempt at doing this video. You guys know I am not an editor, so I don't edit, but I'm only going to do this twice. So here we go. Welcome also to a video about women in war. At the beginning of this year, I had a concept that I was going to do a video a month about a particular woman or women serving in wartime. My focus was going to be on the world wars, but particularly World War II. And then the first two books, I picked a fiction and a nonfiction book that I read, were DNFs. And so that threw me off my game, and I wanted to take some time to kind of relook at how I want to proceed. And I have not proceeded since then. But today I'm going to do a video about a particular woman in war, inspired both by The Women by Kristin and a viewer, Vicky, who asked me when I was going to do another Women in War video. This is not about the subject that I had even planned, but I read The Women earlier this year, and this is one of my favorite books of the year of 2024. Loved it. Kristin, she got some, of course, bad reviews on whatever. Some people complaining, oh, it wasn't really like that, but she did have, she used sources, and I can see when reading Home Before Morning by Lynda Van Devanter, many things in, sorry, I'm shaking the table, many things in The Women. Another book that she used as reference, which I did not read yet, is Healing Wounds by Diane, Carlson, Evans. But this story, this video, is about Home Before Morning. I finished this up. This was my September nonfiction read. Finished it early. And it is a very moving book. Lynda wrote this as part of a form of therapy to try to help her recover from her experiences in Vietnam. She did a year in Vietnam as an Army nurse, and statistics, I find conflicting numbers, but it seems, from what I've been able to Google, that between 10 to 11,000 women served in Vietnam, with most of them being nurses. And after reading this book, I realized that nursing would not ever be something that I would want to do. Lynda starts this book, a good girl, but I want to give you kind of an illustration of the time that they were living and the thought process. This, to me, I'm not shitting on her family, but this is kind of like the mindset that was prevalent at the time. Someone sent her dad a cartoon from one of his friends. It showed a mother and father walking down the street pushing a baby carriage with 4 little girls, each wearing frilly little dresses and ribbons in their hair. The husband was talking with another man, and he said, "We wanted a boy, but Helen goofed." My mother's name was Helen, and the cartoon was stuck in my father's dresser mirror for a long time. That was around the time that I learned that I had an older brother who died at birth. Helen goofed? Helen goofed? Oh, the misogyny. So she also talks about, being a good girl, going to mass or whatever, and they were just an all-American family. And then she goes to nursing school and signs up to be in the Army and gets sent to Vietnam. I won't go into all her experiences in Vietnam. They were probably like many other nurses' experience, especially if you were on or near to the front lines. One particular experience did stay with her, and that was a patient that they couldn't save, a young boy named young man named Gene, who, when she was kicking aside the clothes that they had cut off of him, a picture came out of his shirt, and it was Gene and his girlfriend at their senior prom. And she never forgot this. I want to talk about homecoming and try not to tear up this time. This is kind of a then versus now comparison if you think about now being 20 years ago. When a lot of Vietnam War soldiers returned to the U.S., they weren't given a warm welcome. Not like they were after World War II. Some people were spit on. Some people were called baby killers. Lynda was trying to hitch a ride because I don't know why the Army didn't provide transportation, but they dropped her off somewhere in California, and then she had to get a ride to another airport. So she's trying to hitch a ride, and people won't stop for her, and they shout out the windows, ugly things. And whereas, when I returned home from my first deployment to Afghanistan, we landed in Maine at an airport to get on another airplane, and the halls were lined with citizens clapping for us as we walked by. So that is very stark contrast. I think we've learned our lessons about how we treat veterans. The majority of Home Before Morning is about not the war, but her return and how she had changed. She was gone. The Lynda that she had been was gone, and now she had to try to figure her way out. She knows something's wrong with her. She's drinking too much. She's being promiscuous. I don't like to use that word, but it's an easy word to use. She can't sleep. The only way she can sleep is to drink herself to sleep. And she can't maintain relationships. She starts going to therapy, but she doesn't talk to her therapist about Vietnam. And I've got to find this one part, guys. This pissed me off. I think I wrote Dick in the book. So she gets an appointment, finally. And she doesn't talk to him about Vietnam. He makes some snippy comment before she even sits down about he doesn't give professional discounts because she's a nurse or whatever. She spent 2 hours and $90 with him, and he told her she was just merely another neurotic woman. Finally, she starts talking to other veterans. She initially tries to get in on a march on Washington, I think, but the vets then don't allow her to do that because women weren't in the war, air quotes, and that the vets thought that Nixon and the right, I guess, would think that they were padding their numbers and that, with women. Anywho, a couple chapters later, that changes. This is years later. That changes, and she does start working with male veterans, but on the behalf of females. She also starts studying psychology so she can help other women. Well, she gets into a conversation with another vet, and he's like, I'm saying like too much. He's like, how can you help other women when you can't even help yourself? And she's like, what? And they go back and forth. She's arguing. And finally he says, pay attention, lady. I'm talking about your life. From the moment you walked in here, I could see you were at the edge. How many times have you thought about suicide? When are you going to learn that the emptiness won't go away until you get the war out of your system? You think you can repress your feelings while you help others deal with theirs? And then she realizes he's right. So she started therapy that this guy had been using called Walking Through Vietnam. And there she finally talks about Vietnam and walks through everything that she went through, and then she starts to get better. Lynda established a women's project at the Vietnam Veterans of America to get recognition for women veterans, particularly the nurses, because there just wasn't enough visibility. And nurses returned with PTSD too. Some nurses complained about Home Before Morning because it depicts doctors and nurses and other soldiers partying and drinking and generally blowing off steam. And those complainers felt that she would give service members the idea that they didn't get good treatment. They did get good treatment. She describes that in here. Other women, however, were inspired to write their own books. Winnie Smith wrote American Daughter Gone to War. I think I learned about this also in The Women. And I've not read this one either, but she has the same problems when returning: alcohol abuse, probably promiscuity, I don't know. But I will read this soon, and I will let you know what I think about it. Sorry, I'm in and ahhing. The book, this is a reprint. This one was published in 2001, and there's an afterword by Lynda in this. In the afterword, she reveals that she's been sick, and I can't remember what it is. I can't remember what the illness is, but she believed it was linked to exposure to Agent Orange, and she died the next year, November 15th, 2002, of that disease that she was suffering from, and she was only 55. One other kind of offbeat, fascinating thing I found out in the afterword was she participated in a forum with Country Joe McDonald, who wrote and recorded I Feel Like I'm Fixing to Die Rag. If you don't know that, I'm not going to sing it for you. And then somehow Country Joe McDonald got fascinated by Florence Nightingale, and he has a whole webpage dedicated to Florence Nightingale. So that was a fun tidbit that I learned in this. The last takeaway on this is Lynda talked about not having anyone to talk to when she returned. She returned to her family. She tried to show slideshows, and the family didn't want to see it because it was too gruesome. And she says that in the very beginning, it's on nights like this that they and I must face the realization that we are alone, that ours is a solitary pain to be felt in hundreds of 3 a.m.s when those around us are sleeping peacefully. There was a time when I didn't understand that, when I didn't know how alone I was, how alone we all were. Vietnam was the worst time of my life, yet it was also, in many ways, the most important and the most intense. For years I tried to talk about it. Nobody listened. I kind of got a different story than that. My uncle was in Vietnam. And when I was in high school, I was fascinated by Vietnam War and that whole era. And I asked several times, even after I joined the military, for my uncle to tell me about his experiences, and he never would. Until I returned home from my first deployment to Afghanistan. And then that's all he wanted to talk about it. And I think it was finally, even though we had different experiences, he knew that I could relate to what he was telling me in a way that other people who had not served could not. Whew. This has been all over the place. I try to be more structured, but I probably fucked it up. Anywho, I do recommend Home Before Morning. This has been illuminating. I think that we have made some progress in our treatment of PTSD and in mental health issues, and it not being so stigmatized as it was. But I still think that we have a long way to go. Soldier suicide's still a problem, and post-traumatic stress is still a problem. Even in between wars. The next nonfiction book I'm going to read is Army Wives, and this book was inspired by a series of murders, soldiers killing their wives. This happened in 2002, so I'm not sure that deployments were related. However, I recently read an article about these and other murders. If you Google Fort Bragg murders, you'll find quite a few. But they talk about mefloquine or Lariam, the malaria drug that we had to take, and how that led to hallucinations. I never had any. And a lot of individuals who have committed crimes try to blame that on the drug. Anywho, we still have a long ways to go as far as treatment of soldiers and post-traumatic stress, but I still think we've come a lot farther in where we were back here after Vietnam, and where I've lost my train of thought because I just saw something else. One thing that was significant here, it was another veteran that had gone into giving therapy that was able to help heal Lynda, because that veteran could relate to her experiences and talk her through them from a personal level, understanding what she went through, whereas the other therapist that she tried had no idea, partly because she didn't bring it up, but all they know is what they read on paper, they don't know anything about it from experience. Anywho, I have rambled on long enough. Vicky, this one was for you. If you made it this far, I will try to be more structured in my next video. That is it for me. Happy reading. Oh, I'll put links to all these books down in the description box. Happy reading.